Why, hello there. Welcome to this video. My name is Leah, and today we are going to be talking about 5 tips for interacting with ignorant or transphobic people. Now, I just want to start off by discussing why I'm making this video in the first place. I've been making content since the election talking about how everyone in the LGBTQ community should be preparing for the future under the next Trump administration. Like, for instance, I made a video called 5 Harsh Truths for the Community, and it got a lot of views and a lot of attention and a lot of interaction, and I very much appreciate all that. So this is going to be a continuation on that kind of theme of videos, but today we're going to be focusing on outreach. I have mentioned before, and I will continue to mention, that I think we need to build up allies around the world, in our country and around the world. We need to foster good relationships with people so that they view us favorably and so that it'll be easier for us to fight for our rights in the future. I have advocated for outreach, and I will continue to do that because I feel that it's important. I live in a red state, and I have seen firsthand the impact that I have had on people, being like the only trans person that they've ever met, or the only openly trans person that they've ever met. And I see very little content on YouTube talking about this specific topic, which I understand why, because it is complicated to interact with people, and our personal relationships are messy, as we will discuss. And it's an emotional business. So you can't really do like 5 easy solutions to fix all your interpersonal relationships, because that's not real. But these 5 pieces of advice that I have to give today, I think are genuinely helpful. And I do think that it will make an impact on people that are willing or curious about how they can do better with outreach or just in their interpersonal relationships. So I do need to make a couple caveats before we get going here. I do want to say, within the context of this video, I am not saying that you should withstand abuse or that you should just excuse hateful behavior. That is not at all what I am saying. Obviously, context and nuance is important within the conversation we are having here. And if you feel that a relationship you have with someone is genuinely, quote unquote, too far gone or really harmful for you to engage in, I am not advocating for you to go out of your way to engage with people that seek to hurt you. I just need to make that caveat because I've seen people in the comments talking about how they think outreach is dangerous and stuff like that. Obviously, you need to know what the context of the situation is, and that is part of what I will be talking about here. But yeah, interpersonal relationships are fluid. They are based on emotions. So like, it's a complicated thing. It's not like you can just use science or rationality to figure out a relationship. It's an empathetic game. It's about emotions and understanding human nature. So the first point is understanding the idea of the emotional bank account, or emotional capital. So to try to break this down into simple terms, as a simple summary, people have like an emotional bank account, and when you do something nice to them, you deposit into that bank account, and if you do something bad, you withdraw from it. So the reason why I bring this up, and the reason why this is the first point, is because I think that the starting point for all of this is understanding the context of the relationship that specifically you are thinking about. Like, the context of the specific relationship heavily relies on whether or not you have had good interactions in the past or not. So you may have to do some pondering on like how interactions in the past have gone with you and this individual that you are thinking about, or with the number of individuals that you are thinking about. You want to try to figure out like where you stand in terms of emotional debt with that individual. Are you in the green? Are you in a positive place with that individual where you have capital, like emotional capital, that you can use to maybe encourage like some positive discourse and stuff like that? Or are you in emotional debt to that individual, and maybe you need to build up the relationship a little bit before you are going to be able to have like good faith interactions with that person? If the relationship's in a bad place and you have emotional debt to that individual, you're not going to make any headway in a conversation with them. You're not going to be an influence on that person, because they are going to immediately discredit what you say or think, because they don't care what you say or think, because they don't like you. And so that's like a really important thing to consider here. And I do want to make an additional caveat here, is that like an emotional bank account is not based on whether you're right or not. It's not based on like the rationality of the person's view of you or anything like that. It is entirely emotional. So even if their distaste towards you, or even if the debt is based off of something that's unfair, it still exists. Like, the person may have negative feelings towards you, and that may be unfair. And you may feel like, hey, they shouldn't feel negatively towards me, or it's not really my fault, it's their fault, whatever. Playing that blame game situation is not really going to be useful here. You just need to consider, like, generally speaking, what is the reality of the emotional bank account? Like, come to terms with the fact that, like, there may be a negative relationship here, there may be emotional debt, and that's just like the situation. It doesn't have to be, you don't need to rationalize it or anything like that. So that's point number one, and I hope that made sense. I feel like maybe that might have been a little awkward wording in there, but like, I hope that I got the point across about the emotional bank account and it makes sense. Point number two is to meet people where they are. So the first thing I want to say when it comes to this is that you need to expect ignorance from people. In general, you need to expect people to come from a place of ignorance. I think this is useful because a lot of the times we sort of expect people to treat us with respect and to know how to treat us with respect. And then we become defensive or upset, or just we react emotionally when that's not the case. Managing expectations is really important. I think that generally speaking, expecting people to be ignorant or to get it wrong will kind of help you prepare emotionally for those situations so that it's not like a big surprise or like a shock when it happens. The next part of this is learning how to use rhetoric that is comfortable for the person that you are interacting with. Now, this one is kind of tricky because a lot of us kind of exist in social support systems or social bubbles that are isolated and use kind of niche language or rhetoric. But this is sort of similar to what I was just saying about expecting ignorance. You should not expect people to be in the know about, the certain terms or lingo or anything in terms of rhetoric that you are in the know of. The reason why this is important is because conversations aren't always the best place to educate people on a whole bunch of terms or things like that. Like, you want to get a point across, and the point usually isn't like defining a whole bunch of terms. You want to try to find a way to make your points without relying on incredibly insular rhetoric, is what I mean. The last part of this point is to be curious about where people get their info. So, like, seriously, without judgment, just asking someone, like, who do you listen to when you want information on LGBTQ people? Like, where do you source your information? But this matters because if you understand where their information is coming from, it kind of gives you a little bit of a window into their world and like what's being spoon-fed to them on a daily basis. Okay, so that's point number two. And now we're gonna go on to point number three, which is the idea of right place, right time. So this entire point three, is predicated on the idea that, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Like, it is not possible to force learning or understanding on someone. And so it's really important to consider the idea that, like, you don't want to just like randomly bring this stuff up or like randomly start debates with people. Doing that will immediately ruin any chance you have of having an impact on someone, because trust me, you may think that you're coming from a good place and you're just trying to educate or whatever, but if it was like completely out of the blue or just not an appropriate time, then it's probably going to ruin the entire conversation from the get-go. This is where using point one is really important to kind of like understand where you're at in the relationship with the individual. Making sure that the relationship is in the green and that you have emotional capital will ensure that you can have genuine good faith interactions with that person in the first place, where like maybe there will be some tension or misunderstandings, but you know that forgiveness and things will happen because there's, emotional capital there. The person cares about you, cares about the relationship. And the reason why this is called right place, right time is because, like, that's the thing, is you have to sort of be there in the proper position when the right time comes up. That way, when the person is curious and seeking information, you so happen to be there and they know that you're a source of information on the topic, so they can come to you. And because you have emotional capital with this individual, they feel comfortable having a good faith conversation with you and being open with you and seeking understanding. This is like the magic moment. And I wish that I could give advice on like how to make this happen or like force this moment to happen, but you cannot do that. People have to come to terms with things on their own. And when they are curious, you just need to be there and be willing to teach. All right. So point number 4 is grace and forgiveness. And now I do need to say that this entire point 4, may seem like it's about the other person and like forgiving them for their sake, but it's actually forgiving them for your sake. Holding on to grudges and conflict is just really bad for you in general. And it's going to hinder developing a positive relationship in the future. And it's going to prevent you from healing emotionally from negative experiences with that individual. Now, of course, I need to say that it is natural to react negatively when someone says something bad to you, when someone says something harmful to you. or something that, hurts your feelings, it's normal to have your feelings hurt. The bad part is like holding on to that for a really long time and refusing to heal from it or move past it. This is part of like expecting ignorance from people. Like, people are fallible, and so am I, and so are you. And we're all going to make mistakes. And I think that most of the time we want to be forgiven for those things, and we want to forgive people for those things so that we can work towards improving and growing together. Like, I'm huge on restorative justice. And so I do believe that we should seek to help people grow and learn and become better people, rather than simply just shunning people or like refusing to allow someone the space to grow. I know social media makes it seem like, there are perfect people and then there are the bad people, but I promise you, no one is perfect. So I think having an air of forgiveness and grace is just really important in general. The last part of point 4 is that it takes time. You need to be patient. You need to be understanding that like a single interaction, a single good faith conversation, a single moment is not going to be enough to change someone entirely. What we are talking about is creating a process where you can have a series of positive interactions that over time build a positive relationship and empathy so that the person humanizes the community. And when they think of a trans person or a queer person or whatever, they imagine this great friend that they have who they care about deeply, and not just some weird stereotype or some wild fantasy image of something that someone else has painted for them. Very few people change overnight or instantly on these things. Oftentimes pivots are slow and they take time because like people have inertia with their beliefs. There's confirmation bias. So people naturally seek to confirm beliefs they already have. And no one wants to admit that they've been hateful or they've been a fool or they've been wrong in the past. So it takes a lot of time, energy, and effort for people to unlearn bad positions. Just to have a little bit of vulnerability here, I used to be heavily repressed and I was not a very nice person. Like, even 8 years ago, I was just not a very nice person. I had a lot of negative beliefs and feelings, and I projected a lot of that stuff outwards. And so I was hateful. I was cynical. I used to just like get mad at happy people for being happy because I was so miserable. And so I was just not a very nice person to be around. And it took a lot of time for me to work on myself and accept that I was a problem and that I needed to grow up, essentially. But if people had just shunned me entirely and not given me the chance or the room to grow, then I never would have become the person that I am today. And I think that's important. All right, I'm trying to get through these points with a reasonable time frame because I understand that sometimes I'm long-winded and my videos end up being quite long. So we're going to jump into point number 5 here. And point number 5 is just being vulnerable and understanding meta feelings. So the first thing to talk about are meta feelings, because probably a lot of you don't know what meta feelings are. Essentially, what they are just feelings about feelings. So they're like secondary or tertiary feelings. So this may sound really complicated, but I can break it down really easily. When you have something happen to you, you have just like an involuntary reaction. Like when something happens, there's an emotional response. And usually these are incredibly basic things like anger, like just like a erg, or like a happy feeling or a sad feeling, or a fearful feeling. Meta feelings are what happen after that. So you feel mad at someone and then you feel guilty that you were mad at that person. So as you can see, the second feeling, like the guilt, is tied to the first one. It's how you feel about the fact that you reacted a certain way. Meta feelings are real, but they often become very complicated and they often make situations very messy because you're dealing with like second or third order thoughts and feelings that aren't really expressly shared. And sometimes it's just really hard to get to the center of a matter when someone is stuck on a thing like guilt or shame or rage. So the reason why vulnerability is a part of this is because vulnerability requires you to cut through those meta feelings. Like when someone makes you feel bad and they make you upset, you may get angry at the person or feel rage at the person, that or frustration towards the person. You need to get past that meta feeling so that you can arrive at the initial feeling, which was like, that made me feel bad. That made me feel like hurt. And the reason why this is so important is because you want to convey that actual feeling to the person and not the meta feeling. You want to convey that like what they said genuinely hurt your feelings and made you feel bad. And if they are caring at all, if they have any sort of positive relationship with you, if there's any emotional capital with that individual, and you are vulnerable and honest about like a true reaction that you had to something someone said, you are way, way more likely to reach that person and to have them understand that they genuinely hurt your feelings and did something that was inappropriate. This requires a lot of working on your inner landscape and kind of confronting the fact that you may have a lot of cynicism. You may feel very smug about your position in certain relationships where you feel like the victim, which may very well be true. But those feelings are often based on a foundation of like, so and so made me feel really bad. I used to have a positive relationship and then they started treating me this way. And now I feel really bad and it hurt my feelings because I cared about this person or I cared about what they think or whatever. When you open up to people, you want them to see the heart of the matter. You want them to see the true, authentic feelings that you are having and not just like the layers of protective emotional armor that you have built over top of it. This will in turn help people evaluate their meta feelings, where maybe instead of them just jumping into all sorts of like secondary feelings about like defensiveness and stuff like that, they realize that they were simply just ignorant and that was it. I hope that that made sense, that last point, because I feel like that one's really important. It's probably one of the most important points because being a good advocate requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of inner work and it requires a good support network, among many other things. Like oftentimes the mindset and the way in which you approach these situations is like 80% of it. And people can sense when like you're being smug or you're being snide or like you genuinely don't want to better the relationship. You just want to take a shot at the person for how stupid you think they are or whatever. So yeah, working on some of this stuff can kind of help you arrive at a sort of like emotional confidence. You can work on building a foundation of personal understanding and introspection that is strong and confident, and you can have a support network that helps reaffirm and support who you are so that when you're engaging with people like this, you're not depending on their reaction for your own sense of affirmation or confidence. Like you want to enter the conversation feeling confident in your identity, feeling confident in your ideals, your beliefs, and your understanding of things. Like you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to word things perfectly. A lot of it kind of has to come down to just like the emotional wavelength that you're operating on and how you interact with people. In my personal life, I have had more than a few people come up to me and tell me that they feel comfortable asking me certain questions or being curious about certain things because of the atmosphere or the vibe that I give off to people, that I'm empathetic and that I am not going to just fly off the handle if they say something inappropriate to me, which is important to me because I want to be the person that's there to then, gently kind of tell the person like, hey, I appreciate that you were vulnerable. You were honest with me. I'm going to meet you where you are. But I want you to know for the future that if you're talking to someone like me, someone in the community, please don't like do this or that or, whatever. And obviously that's a simplification of an incredibly long conversation that's based on emotions and stuff like that. But the point is just to say that like I have seen this stuff work in my own life. And honestly, in my 5 Harsh Truths video, I saw a lot of comments of people talking about their own personal experiences with outreach or living in a red state and being like a representative for the community. And I think it's encouraging to see that a lot of people have shared experiences with what I've experienced. Okay, so that's it. I hope that this is useful during the holiday season. I wanted to get this up the day before Thanksgiving, and I think I might get that done, but I just wanted to have this video out because I think that during the holiday season, you have a lot of forced interaction with people that maybe you don't see year round. And so there are more opportunities, or generally it's a higher chance that you're going to have some interaction where this kind of advice will be useful. I want to thank everyone so much for the support lately. I am at 8,000 subscribers right now, nearing 9,000 subscribers, and I just cannot believe that, to be totally honest with you guys. I am so astonished at the growth. Like, it's been really humbling and really encouraging, and I'm just all the kind words and things that people have said, I really appreciate you. As I talked about in previous videos, I think building community and organizing right now is incredibly important, and my Discord has recently gotten over 1,000 people. Like, we have more than 1,000 people in my Discord, and a lot of those people are there for similar reasons. They want to connect, they want to build relationships and friendships with people, they want to have support systems, and they want to have networks available to them to ensure their safety. If you would like to join that Discord, you can go ahead and open my description of my video. There's a link tree there. You can find it, click it, it'll open up, and then my Discord link should be there for you to navigate through. It doesn't always work well on mobile, so you may have to try a couple times if it's like busy or there are a lot of people popping in at once. But it's really heartwarming for me to see people come together, to see people organize. And I know it's under a really bad circumstance, but I think that standing together and standing united and working together, having buddy systems, all that stuff is really important for the future. I would greatly appreciate it if you guys were to hit the subscribe button if you like the content. If you want to see more things from me in the future, I plan on making more content like this. I plan on making transition content. I plan on making a lot of stuff. So if you want to see that stuff in the future, then you have to hit that subscribe button. Also, hit the like button. That would help me out a bunch. And leave a comment down below. Let me know which of these tips was helpful for you. If you learned anything, if you feel like this was genuinely helpful for you to like learn how to interact with people a little better, or maybe some just like little tips to consider when you are interacting with people, I would love to hear that feedback. I would love to know what you guys think, what your experiences are like. I hope everyone stays safe and stays well out there. I know that the holidays can be a real bummer for some people and can be actually just a real crappy time of the year overall. But just try to remember to take a little time for yourself, to bring a little joy to yourself, and to, do something affirming for yourself. And last but not least, I definitely recommend that you stay hydrated.